Hey guys, the movie that we are going to recap today is about three high school friends who make an incredible discovery, leading to their developing uncanny powers beyond their understanding. As they learn to control their abilities and use them to their advantage, their lives start to spin out of control and their darker sides begin to take over. This is a 2012 movie directed by Josh Trank with a screenplay from Max Landis. To find out the whole story, make sure you watch the video until the end. Let's get started. The movie begins with Andrew Detmer, a Seattle high school teenager whose mother Karen is sick and bedridden, and his father is an abusive alcoholic. Andrew thinks of himself as an outcast, having little to no friends. Tired of his father's abuse, Andrew recently bought a camera and tells his father that he'll be recording everything from now on. As he gets ready for school in his room, his drunk father beats on his door, demanding he open it. But Andrew refuses due to Richard's current drunken state, finally causing him to give up and storm off. Before leaving for school, Andrew visits his bedridden mother, and she wishes him a good day. Andrew's cousin and his closest friend, Matt, picks up Andrew, and they both head to school. Matt gives Andrew a few words of wisdom from philosophers he's been reading up on while Andrew teases him. Andrew then spends some time recording at his school and showing off his camera in the cafeteria. That's when some teenagers bully Andrew. They take his camera away and begin to ridicule him, but they eventually give it back. On their way back home, Matt invites Andrew to a party, but Andrew doesn't want to go. Matt is determined to make Andrew join him, thinking that spending some time out of his abusive home would be good for him. Andrew eventually reluctantly agrees. Matt also suggests that Andrew should maybe leave the camera behind as it may alienate people away from him, but Andrew insists it's important. Back at home, Andrew is seen looking through his recordings when his father barges in. Richard smacks Andrew across the face, pushing him onto the floor. He yells at Andrew, telling him to open his bedroom door when he says so. Matt and Andrew arrive at the party and split up to socialize with people. Andrew records the party, seeing people having fun and dancing. That's when he spots Casey, a girl who's also recording her day for her vlog. Turns out Matt has a crush on her, and he attempts to make a move on her, but fails miserably. As the party goes on, Andrew's filming gets the negative attention of a drunken attendee who accuses Andrew of filming his girlfriend, and Andrew gets into trouble. That's when Andrew is forced to step out of the party and he heads toward a parking lot. He cries as he cleans dirt off his camera, feeling like he doesn't belong. Then Steve, the popular kid who's running for class president, calls out to Andrew and invites him to join him. He then tells Andrew that he and Matt have found something in the woods that they want Andrew to film what they have discovered. They arrive at a hole in the middle of a clearing. Strange sounds were coming from the pit, and the three entered the hole, and as they explored deeper into the hole, they found a cavern containing a massive glowing crystal. As Andrew films, the object turns red and the group is stricken by nosebleeds and excruciating pain. The camera cuts out. Several weeks later, Matt, Steve, and Andrew are in a backyard playing catch. When Matt throws the ball at Steve, the ball swerves right and hits Steve sideways. Matt then throws the ball at Andrew, and Andrew stops the ball midair with his mind. That's when Andrew's nose starts to bleed again. The three then play with Lego pieces, but they are able to levitate the pieces without actually having to touch them. Turns out that mysterious crystal has given them the power of telekinesis, the ability to move objects with their minds. But they suffer nosebleeds when they overexert themselves. Later, they decide to return to the hole, but find that it has collapsed and that the sheriff's department is sealing off the area for safety. The authorities tell the boys to steer clear from that area. On the ride home, Steve and Andrew talk about their families. Andrew tells Steve about his sick mom and his father used to be a firefighter. The two bond as he tells Steve that an accident has injured Richard and that now he stays home. Steve also shares some problems at home with his parents. Steve then questions Andrew's filming habits, believing it sets up a wall surrounding Andrew. Later that night in Andrew's room where he practices levitating his camera while we hear Richard loudly arguing with someone over the phone, revealing that he is financially struggling to keep his mother alive. The next day, Andrew takes Karen out for a stroll in the marina, and they enjoy a lovely time out. Later, the boys are back at practicing their powers. Matt theorizes that their power is equitable to a muscle they have to train. The night before, he says he could lift up his bed without getting a nosebleed. The three boys develop a close friendship and begin employing their abilities to play pranks, such as scaring children by levitating toys at the store. Later at a diner, Andrew tries stabbing Matt with a fork to show how their powers can even protect them. Andrew then manifests an image of Virgin Mary on his pancake, scaring one of the servers. They then prank a woman by moving her car around in the parking lot. The boys are impressed with their abilities, noting that this was probably the heaviest thing any of them have ever lifted. That's when Steve's nose starts bleeding, but he pretends to be fine. Things go too far, though, when Andrew levitates a rude trucker off the road and into a river. Although Steve saves the man from the river and Matt calls the authorities to take the man to the hospital, they are shocked and outraged that Andrew would carelessly go that far. Andrew doesn't understand their anger when Matt reminds him that he hospitalized a guy. Matt then proposes implementing rules. The following day, they meet with Steve at a landfill when they see that he's levitating above them. He encourages them to try it out. While Matt fails several times, Andrew manages to get himself up, ecstatic that he can float. Later, the boys are soaring through the clouds, flying past one another at breakneck speeds. They even begin throwing a football and catching it in midair. That's when a plane suddenly flies past them, making them slow down. The plane knocks out Steve when Andrew flies in to save him, but they keep falling. Andrew slows them down seconds before hitting the ground, ending up unscathed. Matt joins them and they end up laughing and cheering. They end up sleeping over at Steve's house when Andrew tells them that this was the best day of his life. The next day in school, they agree to fly around the world together after graduation, with Andrew expressing an interest in visiting Tibet because of its peaceful nature. Steve and Matt agree. Matt later meets with Casey, handing her a donation telling her that it's for the droughts she mentioned in her vlog. Casey tells him to mail it himself. She then asks him the reason for his sudden change in behavior. Matt says that he's changed now and has a better understanding of people. Andrew and Steve are hanging out on the top of a building while Steve is amazed, seeing that he can now levitate his camera with finesse. Andrew tells him how his relationship with Matt was different before high school. They were close friends before Matt started avoiding him. Steve then encourages Andrew to enter the school talent show to gain a little popularity, telling Andrew he'll help him with the performance. Before he goes, his mother shows her admiration for his friends, but his drunken father is suspicious. Believing he's up to something, he tells Andrew he's on to him. At the talent show, Andrew amazes his fellow students by disguising his powers as an impressive display of magic tricks, juggling and tightrope walking. At last, Andrew experiences how it's like to be noticed and appreciated. Andrew's having fun at the party while Matt is left with the camera. He leaves a sweet message for Andrew and leaves with Casey. Steve is then the new cameraman looking for Andrew. He goes upstairs to find out that Andrew is thrown up all over the girl he is with. He consoles him, but Andrew angrily forces him out of the room. The next day, Andrew is seen playing with a spider when he ends up splitting it. Richard then discovers Andrew's camera and berates him for keeping such an expensive item to himself while he financially struggles. Richard then attacks him, but Andrew fights back using his powers to overpower Richard. Richard is left moaning and groaning. Meanwhile, Andrew's outburst inflicts nosebleeds and pain on Matt, even though he hasn't even used his powers. Andrew is crying in the middle of a thunderstorm when Steve arrives, saying that his nose started bleeding and he heard Andrew's voice calling him. Andrew asks Steve to leave him alone while Steve tries to calm him down and return to the ground. Andrew grows increasingly frustrated, telling Steve to leave him alone until Steve is suddenly struck by lightning and killed. Later, Andrew is filming at Steve's funeral. After the service, Matt confronts Andrew about the suspicious circumstances of Steve's death. He asks him how Steve was killed by lightning even though there were no lightning strikes reported on the news. Matt demands that Andrew tell the truth, but Andrew remains silent. He avoids the confrontation and flies away. Later, Andrew privately begs forgiveness at Steve's grave, telling him he misses him. Andrew also tells him that he believes his abilities are taking over. He then goes back to the pit where they got their powers and sees it's now overgrown with grass and a pattern is formed around it. Andrew is then ridiculed back at school for vomiting at the party. After being bullied by Wayne again, he uses his power to tear several teeth from Wayne's mouth. In the bathroom, he shows shows the pieces of teeth to the camera and tells how he took them. Later, at a junkyard, Andrew is seen talking to his camera, speaking about evolution and the concept of an apex predator. He talks about how predators don't feel guilty when they hurt someone. He then equates himself as a human apex predator. Later, as Karen's condition deteriorates, Andrew goes to pick up his mother's medication. Before he goes, Matt shows up in Andrew's room, confronting him for the incident at school with Wayne and reminds him about the rules. At the pharmacy, Andrew finds out his mother's medication is too expensive. He then takes his father's old firefighter suit and uses his powers to steal money for her medicine. After mugging some local thugs, he robs a gas station where he inadvertently causes an explosion that puts him in the hospital and under police investigation. Richard enters Andrew's room and starts crying. His upset father tells the unconscious Andrew that his mother has died, and he angrily blames him for her death. Richard starts shouting at Andrew, ordering him to apologize, and as his shouting gets louder, Andrew wakes up, blasting a hole through the hospital wall. While Matt is attending a family birthday party, he suddenly experiences a nosebleed and senses that Andrew is in trouble. He then sees a news report about an explosion. He rushes to the hospital and finds Andrew floating outside the building, dangling his father over the ground by his ankle. Andrew drops his father when Matt swoops in and catches Richard. Matt confronts Andrew, telling Andrew that it's not too late to turn everything around and they can start over. Andrew doesn't agree, and he berates Matt for abandoning him when he needed him. Matt admits to his flaws, but is willing to make this up to him if Andrew stops his attacks. He tries to remind Andrew that this isn't the person he is, but Andrew declares himself an apex predator, attacking Matt, and the pair fight across the city. Crashing through buildings and hurling vehicles, Matt continues to try to reason with Andrew, who is now injured and enraged. He begins using his power to destroy the buildings around him, threatening many other lives. Unable to get through to Andrew, Matt tears a spear from a nearby statue and impales Andrew, killing him. The police surround Matt, but he flies away. Later, Matt lands in Tibet with Andrew's camera. Speaking to the camera while addressing Andrew, he apologizes for killing him, but says he had no other choice. He tells his cousin that he loves him, and he now vows to use his powers for good and to find out what happened to them in that hole. Matt positions the camera to view a Tibetan monastery in the distance and says, "You made it." Before flying away, he says goodbye to Andrew, leaving the camera behind to continue recording the tranquil scene. Well, this is it for today's video. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.